So, welcome back to the Venus Rising Show. This is your host, Venus Vox, coming to you live from Tucson, Arizona. And we are at KMKR 99.9 FM. And I want to welcome to the studio today. We have a special guest, Lola Rainey. And we sat at the Cup Cafe at Club Congress having a nice chat the other day. The reason we got together to chat is that Lola has written a new book. It is called Darkness in the Margins. It is a book of poetry, and it was published by Yasmina Press. It's a local press company. Yasmaya, I should say. Oba. And so Lola has joined me to talk about what has led her to write this book, her experiences growing up in Tucson as an African-American woman, as a writer, as a creative person, as somebody who has a heart for social justice. And the interview starts a little bit disjointed because we had started talking and I realized, I need to turn this microphone on now and get this down. So please welcome Lola Rainey. Because whatever comes out, because there's so many things. Even this, talking about your vision and your identity, and
it was traumatic, and so I started writing. I was always a writer. I was always a writer as a kid, great imagination, and I was wanted to be a journalist, and as I've written about this, went to school to be a journalist and worked hard at that, and in my sophomore, junior year, I managed to get a job at the local newspaper. There were only two newspapers in Tucson at the time, the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson Citizen. And so this is before we just had, I think, VDTs. They were just introducing computers to journalism. So you had to type 100 words, was it 100 words a minute on the type? So we still were typing using carbon paper. That's how long ago. So I fortunately for me, I was a good typist, and I was accepted into journalism department. And I was one of the few black people in journalism. I think maybe one or two other people. That's it. And so, but that had nothing to do with anything. I'm from Tucson. I grew up in a culture where there was not a large black population. It was still a very close knit sort of community, spread out. We all knew each other. We knew, but it was still. It's not LA. It's not Chicago. It's a different type of being. It was not a big deal for me about, being one or two. I was used to that growing up here. But
being one or two,
in terms of a person of color, being a black person in school and high school,
like only
growing up where you were really pretty much
only one or two per classroom.
That's right. So there wasn't a lot of diversity. You had to learn how to be. You were a cultural chameleon. You adapted and you moved and mixed in with people because that's what was needed. Right. My friends and folks were all sort of like mixed in groups of folks because there really wasn't a distinctive black community as much as it was. We had these settlements and neighborhoods that they're occupied by black families that we all knew. And so, but back to the story. So anyway, I was back, and so I was, just excited to be in the journalism department. I'd always wanted to be, I was doing school newspapers, and when I said I was going to be a writer, my family was like, what? You got to go to college to be a nurse or a teacher, do something practical.
Right.
You mean you're going to be a writer? They didn't know any writers. I didn't know any writers. But I love books, and I love writing, I love journalism, and I had this dream, and so I pursued it. And most of the people in my department, like old gnarly white men who looked like they're out of movies, like the old 50s, 40 movies of the newsrooms with their suits and ties and their gruffy, a little hard edged, That's who they were, but that was cool too for me because I'm like, that's what I expected. So I went and I worked hard to get through because you get automatic Fs for any small errors in your writing and stuff. And I got through my first year, and I was like, I'm like blazing. And so then I started looking for jobs in the newspaper industry. And I finally, I was calling the newspaper all the time because, again, we didn't have internet. You word of mouth, you know
Right.
somebody type of thing. And I didn't know anybody, so I was just on the phone calling, asking, do you have a job? Any job, really, at the newspaper. And they finally hired me summer of my sophomore, junior year, to work as a copy girl, which was a gopher. Just a gopher. But it didn't matter. You were in the newsroom. And I did things like make coffee for the managing editor.
Well, not so
It
nice.
he reminds me of Chris Matthews, who's no longer, he just resigned, but from MSNBC for a lot of reasons. But he was like that guy with the white hair, and I come in with this coffee and quietly put it on his desk and sort of ease my way out. He had this big office with this glass, so you could see the whole
Oh my
newsroom.
God.
It was just,
wow.
and everyone had typewriters.
Right.
And then we had the AP machines, the wire machines in a room. That was my job, is to tear the copy off the wire machines and give it to the desk editors, and they go through it, and I take the trays back to the cafeteria. But I was just so enmeshed and so caught up in the idea of being part of that. And I had been there. I was working the night shift from 3 to 11. There was one other person who was a copy boy, which I should have known. He's a black man who's a retired military guy, but he was the copy boy. I should have, caught on then. But hey, again, I was very colored and very simple and superficial in my thinking about race relations and things like that. I just wasn't very deep at that time.
And so many of us, when we're young, it's like it takes a learning experience. Oftentimes we have to learn about stuff.
Yeah,
'cause
those things.
Because when we're in the water, the fish in the water, we don't ask about the water.
You just want to be there and be in the moment.
Yeah.
And you're overlooking things because you don't want to see them, really.
That too.
Because because you're all about doing you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was about that, and so I was not prepared for the moment when one of the people who I really liked was an editor, desk editor. And he was not from. He didn't fit the type of the guys who were in the newsroom at the time. They were very conservative. This guy was from New York, long hair, yada yada, and he was very easy to talk to. And he would spend time talking to me. And so one day I came in. I'd been there like maybe a month, and he asked me to go to lunch with him. And I said okay. And when we went to lunch, he said to me, "This is your last day." I said, "What?" He said, "This is going to be your last day. I've been asked to tell you this is your last day." And I said, why? And he just basically told me that if I was in Detroit, I was in like Chicago or New York, I'd be okay. But I didn't fit in. And there was no place for me there.
That must have been devastating.
I was, yeah. That is one of those, and I stuffed it so deep. I literally didn't have a moment to react to it until last year when I was doing an interview, and someone asked me we were talking about racism and experiences with racism, and I was denying that I'd had an experience. No, I've never had it. And then somewhere, something cracked open inside of me, and with the cameras rolling, because I didn't even, all of a sudden, I remembered, like for the first time in like 20, 30, 40 years, I remembered this moment that I stuffed down and buried so deep because it was so devastating. It was like a dream-killing moment.
Well, you changed careers.
I totally changed careers.
Yeah.
Went into law because they stole my dream. They killed my dream, and I was like, that was traumatic. And so they asked me about that, and all of a sudden I started talking, and I couldn't stop crying.
Wow.
I was so embarrassed because I'm talking on camera and all these tears come, and I can't stop crying because for the first time in all those years, I allowed myself to feel what happened to me in that moment.
Whoa.
I couldn't. The body shut it down because I couldn't handle it back then. It just sealed it. It sealed it and buried it so I could continue to move forward. And then when it came out, it was like, oh my gosh, I cried for weeks. I couldn't stop crying. I literally, of course, I had to talk to my therapist. I couldn't stop crying because I had never allowed myself to feel that pain.
And you also, didn't you say that you didn't even tell your parents
No,
what really happened?
yeah, because I was embarrassed. Too embarrassed because I was ashamed. I mean, like, and it's like, you know, and I almost felt like I took a chance on something that was outside of my reach, and I believed that I still, and then that this proved that I was outside of my you know, that was not for me, that I should have stuck to something like nursing or teaching or something more within the realm of what was possible for a black girl.
But then you went into law.
But of all the things, and the funny thing is, I only applied one place.
Oh, really?
Only one place.
Okay.
Because I didn't believe it was. I mean, I wasn't committed to law. It was just.
May as well.
It was just a door. It was a door. It was a door that opened. And I otherwise I was going to be working at J.C. Penney's. I was going to be doing that type, because there was no other jobs for a person with a liberal arts degree in this town. I mean, what can you do? I mean, sales clerk, anything, basically everything I could have done when I graduated from high school. I was looking to as a potential job, because I had a kid by that time, and I was married, and I had to pay bills.
Right.
And I couldn't afford to waste any more time on dreams.
Right.
And I was like, I can't invest any more time chasing dreams that are not going to be realized. And so when the door opened for law, I went through it because it seemed like a practical thing to do, not because I had a love.
So then, as you got into law, what was that like? I mean, what was the point where you felt like? I feel like I'm sensing that you do have a passion and that you do have a direction or something that you felt like.
I liked litigation because it was like stage. It was like being on a stage. Because I was doing little plays before I went to law school. I was doing plays and things with the local theater group, and so again, I was always dabbling in theater and arts. And so I love the idea of being in the courtroom. But the funny thing is, I have to tell you, the first time I did a trial, I was working at the city prosecutor's office at the time. I started out as a prosecutor. People are always surprised. I started and so I was.
That's a court appointed.
You're a prosecutor, work for the state. So you're the person bringing the charges against an individual, the defendant.
Right.
And so you're the one proving the case and trying to show that they're guilty or responsible for the things. So I started out at city court doing misdemeanors, which are crimes that don't carry less than 6 months in jail and less than, I think it's $1,000. Okay. So, and city court, which is right around the corner around here. So I was a city prosecutor, and but I was horrible.
Really?
I was terrible. I was horrible because I would sit there. The first few trials I did, I have a script, and I'm literally reading the script. Reading the script.
But this is what you had written.
I had written, and I'm talking. So I'm not really talking to the jurors. I'm just looking. I got this book upset. Anyway, and it was horrible. And my father told me. I don't know how he saw me. Speaking someplace around the same time I was doing my beginning work as a prosecutor, and he said to me, "Daughter, you're trying to say too much." He goes, "Say less." And he goes, and don't worry about it not being perfect. Just say what you need to say and sit down.
That sounds like some pretty good advice.
And so what it did was, I started practicing how to speak without a script. Started practicing and practicing and practicing, and it got to the point where I really, really, really got good at this. And I was asked to. I became one of their best litigators because then they asked me to argue a case in front of the state Supreme Court. I was a real young lawyer at the time.
Wow.
So I was a very young lawyer.
Whoa, that's an honor.
From being the person reading a script and not making eye contact because I was so scared and so afraid, to being one of the top litigators in the office and being asked to represent the office in a case in front of the Supreme Court, which was interesting.
Wow.
So I'm saying, so that so the progression from that shy, introverted, even though I love the courtroom, I just lack the confidence in my abilities. And then once I began to understand the courtroom was like a stage, and all that was drama and things I was doing, theater and stuff, it started to make sense to me in a different way, and it
Right.
gave me sort of a framework for being a litigator, and getting my sea legs.
So, as you got your sea legs, what did you grow into as a
I went.
attorney?
I went from misdemeanors to doing more. I moved into as a prosecutor, district attorney's officer, a county attorney's office.
We got a lot of
We have a train. Isn't that so cool? Oh, yeah. I love the train. Have you ever ridden the train from here to?
No, I haven't.
You should try. I went from here to Austin.
Yeah?
You get on a train. It's wonderful to just see the world from the train.
I lived in Europe some, so we did a lot of trains
see, now, I
there.
never did. Well,
Yeah.
yes, I did. I'm sorry, because I did. I did the train. My brother has a house in Marseille.
Oh, nice.
So we took the train,
Nice.
the
I'm
bullet
gonna
train,
visit.
the bullet train. Is a bullet train from there to Paris.
Right?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
But I didn't. And then we did. But anyway, but we didn't do But I didn't do the train like around. Like
Go Europe past like we did, like everybody did when we were young.
Yeah. See,
I never got to do it
that.
either.
Yes, I didn't get to do that.
I wanted to.
Yeah, I did.
And then it became no longer inexpensive by the time I was going to try to do it.
It's not. It's really.
Yeah, it's not inexpensive anymore, and you can't just get on and off at will like how.
But we used to be now because of all the border issues. Not the borders.
And making money too. It's like you can't get on and off the. You can't buy a 10-day Euro pass and get on and off. You have to buy so many trips on that 10 days. And so they're still charging you per segment now.
Okay.
And that was 96. I was working at TWA, and so I was taking trips over there. And I was like trying to figure out, well, how am I going to get around and take my boys with me, and just.
This is the thing. I mean, I was just going to say, I didn't. I love the train, and I love seeing the part of America that you can't see from the highway, and you get to see these little towns, little towns that are there.
I'm gonna clap.
Yes.
That way it tells me that, okay, there was a little thing there I want to edit out.
Yeah.
I'm going to edit out the train part.
Okay. All right.
Maybe.
Right.
I'm going to edit out the clapping anyway. Whatever.
So then I ended up moving into more to working for the district, the county attorney's office, doing violent crimes for a while, doing litigation and trying cases, and which was in itself an experience, because I think that someone said to me, well, because I'm now an abolitionist doing work with the bail fund here, and our goal is to end pretrial detention so that poor people and people in general are not being held in custody simply because they're poor, or more importantly, because we want to punish people for being arrested, and we criminalize certain groups of people because that we need their bodies to help, pay for the. Pay for all the perks and things that the criminal justice system runs on. Okay, we need somebody to be prosecuted, and someone to be defended, and someone to be sentenced, and someone to sit in prison and jail. So I mean, that's a business of sorts. But anyway,
especially with all the for-profit prisons now.
And the state too. We have the fourth highest prison population in the country.
Fourth largest.
That shows you how deeply invested we are in the prison industrial complex here. So, but at the time, again, I'm coming in. The idea, I'm trying to chase down bad guys and punish them. And my idea of punishment was putting people incarcerating people, because that's what I thought was the thing to do. That's how we change. That's what people accountable. And there wasn't, and having been gone through a law school that, as I said, socializes you, trains you to think a certain way. Law schools are very classist, elitist, racist places. And my parents didn't, the idea of going to law school was that, hey, I'm coming up in the world.
Exactly.
Yeah,
right?
You're coming from a working class background, becoming a lawyer. Boy, you're coming a black lawyer. Wow, you're coming up in the world, and
a woman black
lawyer. Mm-hmm. My gosh, so people want you to have this success and represent a certain type of, a certain type of life and image, and that idea of doing justice sounds very good. And justice in the minds of a lot of people was, prosecute those bad guys.
Right.
They deserve to be in jail. And so, like, again, it wasn't a lot of deep analysis involved. It was really motivated by the values and the training and perspective I had about criminal justice at the time. So I did that for a number of years, and then I got out and became and was into private practice.
Oh, really? Okay.
Defending people. Flip side, doing criminal law, criminal defense, and both the federal courts and the city courts, and in certainly the superior courts, as well as discrimination cases, and a lot of divorce cases, because it was bread and butter, paid the bills.
Yeah,
and I was doing that at the time when my vision issues began to come. So I was forced to shut down my practice for a period of time while I tried to recover my vision. So I entered a whole world of the disabled and the sightless and low vision, and which I have to say, which I'm so grateful for that, even though it was hard, because I learned so much about how the world sees you when you have a disability. And that's probably one of the reasons why I don't speak about it as much, because I know I'm a black woman, a large black woman at that. There are already people doing judgments and perceptions and things that make it hard for me to navigate. Harder, not harder.
Not impossible, but
not
harder.
because I'm very privileged as well. I understand my privilege that comes with my education and all these other things, but understand it's still not the same as, I think that a woman, I always say that if a white woman starts to cry, people normally pay attention. If I start to cry, no one notices for the most part.
Well, and also I remember reading a long time ago, and you can maybe tell me if this is true or not, but I read somewhere that I guess culturally, which means white people did not think that black people felt pain.
Right.
Is that true? Is that
there's still one of the problems with the medical practice.
That's what I'm talking about. Most of the medical thing.
They don't.
As if they're not fully human or something.
Well, because they think they heard myths and also they're ignorant.
And they're ignorant.
And they're ignorant and their arrogance keeps them from asking someone things.
Because it just shocked me when I read that. I was just like, what? How can somebody possibly think that another person doesn't feel pain?
People do, because they don't know, and because they actually believe that there are real physiological differences between people of color, that black people and white people are not the same, and it's just ridiculous.
Which is ridiculous.
But if you believe it, and you don't associate with people, black people, you don't go to their houses, you never interact with them in any intimate way, then what you know is what you see in very limited ways, and things that your limited experience give you. So
and what you see on TV and in the news
and the movies,
yeah,
and what your friends talk about and your parents talk about. So that becomes your truth. So and that's a problem.
And so what kind of made me think of that was the idea of having a disability, and realize the knowledge that we gain from that, the compassion,
and the understanding that some of the coolest people in my life were the blind people from the National Federation of the Blind, because they came to my aid. I went back to school and got an advanced law degree during the period of time that I was blind.
Oh, okay.
And it would not have been possible had I not had support from the National Federation of the Blind.
Oh.
Because the expectations that the society has for disabled people generally is subpar. And for a person, a black woman who aspired to do something, I already had a law degree. To them, that was like already, okay, you've got as much education as you need, so we're not investing. Yes, right. We're not giving you no more money, honey. You can just sit here and deal with your disability, but we're not here to help you grow. And my friends from National National Federation of the Blind came to my aid and fought with vocational rehab and really helped me push for the support I needed to go. So I said, if I'm going to sit out here while I'm trying to go through this period of surgery and recovery and stuff like that, which is going to be more than, it could have been years, a couple years at least, I need to be doing something with my life. And one of the people who also put that bug in my ear, I love her and I will always love her for her kindness, I had two people who I met when I was blind at the local orientation. It was a blindness center. And so one of the ladies I met was a professor who'd been disabled by a prick on her finger. She was pricked by a flower. And yes, by a palm tree, pricked by a palm tree, and she ended up with a staph infection, and it's actually very common, but for gardeners, but she was not given, she was misdiagnosed and given the wrong treatment, and so instead of getting better, it got worse. It got septic. She had a massive heart attack, and and the blood clot went to her brain, and she had a stroke.
Oh my gosh!
So, and she was a professor at medical school. And you see her curriculum vitae, you see she was just, oh my gosh, she was brilliant. Wow. So they let her out of the hospital and rehab, and she said she had lost use of her arm, her hand, and of course she said my brain was damaged. She was not able to teach anymore. But she said to me, and she said, Lola, she said, cells have memory.
Say what?
Cells, blood cells. Cells have memory.
Ah.
And so she said she knew this. And so she used art to help regenerate her nerves and her arms and things, because she understood how the body, so she built up new nerve connections, and she became a master potter. And so even though she still had these disabilities, she had always wanted to move in the desert. She paid someone to drive her across from her home, I think in Nebraska, to the desert, and she ended up living in an apartment someplace near the Blind Center, and decided to volunteer. When I met her at the Blind Center doing art. Because I was like not working. I was waiting for surgery, and I was just a mess, a hot mess, going through a divorce, blind, and having lost my anyway. And so I was taking a pottery class from her, and she kept saying to me, I think I wrote a story about this a long time ago. She kept saying, I do a pot, and she said, break it. Do a pot, break it. And I was like, this is going on for weeks. She's like, breaking all my pots. And she finally said to me, Lola, you're too angry. You're too angry. She says, clay is alive. It's alive. It's not. She says, and what you put into the clay is what is reflected there. She says, and you see how it looks how misshapen. It's all that. That's coming from this anger, and so you will never make beautiful pots because you are so deeply enmeshed in your anger. You have to figure this out. Oh my gosh, I will tell you, I still have the one pot, the first pot I made that she told me to keep. I still have it at my house because it took so long.
I bet that would be a very precious pot.
It was a very precious pot. The first pot, she said, keep this one. I was like, and let me say this. I actually went on to submit work to the Pima County Fair. I won a blue ribbon, 2 blue ribbons. That's what I'm telling you. That's what this woman did. She had me making plots. I mean, from being a lawyer to making plots in a blind center that I ended up putting into the displaying at the Pima County Fair and winning awards.
So this is when you developed a relationship with them, and then they helped you to go back to school.
They said to me, she said to me, Lola, you don't belong here. You don't belong here. I know, she says, and she said, look around you. She said, you see people who have all kinds of tics and behaviors. She said, that's nothing to do with their blindness. It has to do with isolation.
Oh.
When you're isolated, when you are allowed to be in your head, and no one cares enough to tell you when you're starting to do things that are really odd and peculiar. You're allowed to. And after a while, those things become barriers to your ability to be part of this. So this is what's happening. This is what happens to people who are institutionalized. They get isolated. They're socially isolated. Their world closes in and gets too small. And she said, and you can't let that happen. She says, you're gonna get out of here. She said, you have to get out of here. You got to go back into the world. I don't care how hard it is. You got to go back into the world. So she's one of those people who taught me art, healed me through her art, and then after she started seeing my healing, said, it's time to go. Get out of here. Get out of here. And I did. I got out of it. I went back to school. But it's one of the reasons I was able to do that, because I had people who sort of came alongside me and said, no, you don't belong here. Get the hell up out of here, girl. And so we did that.
That kind of support, that kind of community support from friends and family is so important.
Well, I think that what you recognize is that there are people who come into your life who are like guardians or guides who materialize at unexpected times. I didn't know her from Adam. But yet she was there and I was there. We had this intersection, and she was who I needed to be in my life at that time. And that she was as brilliant as she was, and understood and saw me and said, you don't belong here. You will become like them if you stay here much longer, dear.
So I'm really curious about the next phase of your story. So you go back to school.
Get this.
And what did that give for you?
I think that the thing that happened was so funny. As I had to travel to Mexico for a while as part of this.
Okay, cool. As part of the healing process?
As part of the preparation for going to school, because you have to work in another language, and so Spanish, of course, is the language I chose.
Yeah.
And I studied Spanish a lot, but I wasn't fluent. And I am from I have a Southern black accent in my family, so my Spanish was never particularly great. But I did a cultural Spanish immersion and did some things.
Nice. That's fun.
That was a lot of fun. And and came back and started working on, it was international law, but my emphasis was on indigenous rights, because that was the thing that I found most interesting. And the thing was, it was so funny because I tell people this, because when I did my thesis, which I spent, it's like maybe 2 years, year and a half.
It takes you a long time to write a thesis.
Yeah, write a thesis.
Yeah.
And
I never did.
Yeah, so I was writing my thesis and da-da-da-da. And, I was, when I finally got it done, I said, well, I need to have it edited. I was so excited. I could find no one who wanted to read it. After all, nobody. I sent copies out to friends. I sent copies to people asking, and no one wanted to read it.
Oh no! Why?
I think it was because it was on indigenous people in Mexico, and I incorporated mythology and different parts of it. It was
Sounds fascinating.
It really was a wonderful piece, but I think that people thought maybe if I had done something like specifically connected to black people, it might have made more sense, but I wasn't. I'm a black woman talking about indigenous people in Mexico and talking about that culture and legal issues that dealt with colonialism and just a totally different thing. And I think people didn't know what to make of it. And so I was so distressed because I worked so hard and I realized no one believed in it. No one believed in it enough to really want to invest time in supporting that. And so here I was at this crossroad, like, well, what am I going to do now? I mean, the thesis was completed, it was done, and this is what happened. One of my sources was American Indian Law Review, which is really highly respected source for lawyers and scholars, and a number of my professors had submitted work in that law review out of Oklahoma. And so I just put a stamp on my thesis and sent it to them. because I mean, literally, no one had read it.
Okay. I'm curious.
And then a few weeks later, I get a letter saying they want to publish it. And then I get a talk to the editor, and he said it's one of the best things he'd read in a very long time. Floored. Because I had no one in my life who seemed to care about this. And on a humbug, just said, I'm going to send it in. And there it is. It's published. Yeah, amazing.
So my
So
question
that led me to
Okay.
work that I ultimately ended up doing for the tribes.
Oh.
So once I started working again, after I got my vision healed enough, I ended up working for tribes on the river.
Okay.
And
I
that,
forgot that part.
yeah. And then from there, I had my relapse with my vision issues that forced me to regroup and reimagine my life. And I traveled a bit, and taught at different places, and traveled and had some amazing experiences abroad,
Okay.
and just deepened my knowledge of who I was in my life, and then I realized I was more than just a lawyer. That there was so much more to me than that. I had to be, because I couldn't go back and do those things anymore. I had to figure out, so now what? And I spent time. I've been spending time just sort of developing and growing into a more well-rounded life.
So I'm just getting this sense. I'm just listening to everything, and I'm trying to just let it seep into me in a way of just sort of kind of breathing into what your story makes me feel like. It makes me feel like, and how I'm hoping that how you feel as well. Just the idea of going through first being a prosecutor and then moving through all these different aspects. Well, first your initial experience, having your dream broken, and then going into something that seemed practical and like, well, okay, this seems like a good idea. It's a way to make money.
Yeah, okay. Make everyone happy, be proud. Status.
And then you get into law and you start learning about all this stuff, and you start learning more and more about what happens to people as they're going through this legal system.
Yes.
And then coming up and going back to school, getting this indigenous focus, and being able to then see even more. I mean, it makes me think about what's happening right now.
Yeah, because what it did is, particularly with the tribes, because we were fighting for against the state, against the federal government. We were constantly in wars, and with people from the other folks who thought that they were entitled to take from the tribes their lands and any other thing, because that's what we do. And so I was engaged. So I had a totally, again, my idea of what it meant to be a lawyer and advocacy and justice began to change, because tribes have their own system, way of doing things, own way of looking at the world, and it is not rooted in Western thinking, really.
And their legal system is completely separate.
Well, but it has a facade of because under the Constitution, a lot of them adopted Western style.
Oh yeah, Western style
courts.
Yeah.
But they still don't. So they have this semblance, the facade of West. But they're tribal people operating within the frame with these sort of like these very structures that are still rooted in customary law and tribal, worldviews. So you have to, so that, just because you walk into a courtroom that sort of looks familiar, it's very different.
But I mean, and also it's a completely separate. I mean, they have their own.
Yes, they're tribal nations.
Yeah.
So they're not. So their tribal governments have their own. They create their own laws, their own codes, all that stuff. So it's not. Even though it looks familiar, but it really is different. And so, so I came back when I was gone for a while, and then I came back home and I started looking at trying to get involved again in community activities here in Tucson. I came back home mainly because my parents were aging, and my family really wanted me to come back. It was tough to leave. I wanted to stay out in the world.
Oh, I bet.
But I came back for them, and I've been here primarily for my family mostly. And so I found things to do here, and eventually found myself back dabbling with issues of criminal injustice. And that's how I got into creating the Bail Fund, which is the Second Chance Community Bail Fund. But throughout this time, I have always used writing as an art as a way to not only to heal, but to just creative expression is a very important part of who I am.
I really like how you just brought this back around to why we met.
Right.
You know, why we're here. The fact that you just wrote a book and you just had it. It's called Darkness in the Margins, and it's primarily like poetry.
It is poetry.
Yeah,
it's a poetry book.
Yeah.
And it's about women, specifically Black women, growing up in an environment where they are sometimes perceived as invisible, but yet they are living in the margins, living lives. Some of them desperate, some of them much more, fleshed out, and I think more comfortable and then others that are, from, I call wise children, who are able to see the world in ways that adults don't always appreciate. The smart kids in the world.
Right.
And also they deal with the hardships of relationships and how women in these situations, I say it's like a flower growing up through concrete. You don't see the flower until but underneath that concrete all that time, this flower is doing what it does, and finally it has the strength to break through. But you don't see the process of what's going on to transform it into this powerful little thing that's going to break through. So that's what this story. These are women who are blossoming and growing and being, transformed in the margins in ways that people don't see because they don't see them until they have a reason to. But their lives are still moving and growing all around you on a regular basis. It's like just about everybody we see, who we have decided is not as important as us.
So has this been a long time coming?
It has been. It's been a number of years. I first started writing poetry because I was doing a lot of short stories and social justice pieces.
Okay.
Blogs and things like that on racial social justice. Even when I was away, that was my thing. I did a show called Bangkok Poetry Streams because I was living
Say that again?
I was Bangkok Poetry Streams. I was living in Bangkok.
Nice.
And I started reading poetry that I was writing, and then I did a show called Take a Bite Out the Big Mango. I was doing interviews, and so I was doing all these little podcasts and production pieces, and but I started writing poetry when I was overseas. I don't know why. I just started writing poetry. And I'm going to tell you, one of my first poems, I think I have it. It's one of my first poems, because I was into rhyme and stuff.
Right.
I'm the first poet, I'm a rhyme.
My grandmother used to write poetry, and she was always very concerned about rhyming meter.
Yes. So I'm like, okay. So, but I don't know. It was just a thing that felt right. And one of the first poems I wrote was "We Are Excellent in Love," and I think I have it here because someone asked me about it, and I said I forgot about that, and let me see if I can find it.
Absolutely.
And I was said because it was the first poem I wrote that gave me the sense that I could actually write poetry. And up until that point, I always thought, I don't know what I thought about poetry. I enjoyed it, but I never considered myself to be a poet. Not seriously. I just thought that was just sort of, it was a stretch,
Right.
Stay in your lane type of thing. Stay in your lane. And my lane was short stories and articles and things that dealt with subjects that I felt were, let me see if I can find this, were excellent.
Yeah, I started out writing songs.
I think that for me, and I will tell you about the project. This is We're Excellent in Love. I think I found it here, and let me read this to you.
Okay.
It's again, and I just started working on this because I was thinking about what makes us excellent? What inspires us to go beyond what we think is possible, to do something? So, and this is what I came up with, and people are like, "Why did you do that?" I don't know. Okay. What is excellence but the human spirit soaring to newfound height? Yet what compels the soul take flight into a starry night? And what unseen power lifts the shimmering veil to reveal the mysteries beyond our sight? I say it is bliss that kindles the soul's ascent from darkness into light. But it is love that gives bliss radiance and makes it shine so bright. And what is bliss but hope reborn, the dawn of a new morn? The slumbering soul awakened to a noble quest to freely love without regret, though life cruelly put heart to test. And there is no greater hope than love once found will last forevermore, and no greater bliss than true love's kiss to make the spirit soar. Yes, it is love that sets the soul adrift into the heavens above. It is love that makes us excellent, and we are excellent in love.
I love it.
That was the first poem.
That's your first poem.
That's the first poem I wrote when I was in Thailand.
Wow.
and like I said, it just came from somewhere, and from there, it became the form that I found the most appropriate for what I was feeling and who I was. And it was a cumulative type of thing, I believe. It had been waiting for the right moment to make its claim on me.
That is actually really, that imagery is really cool. I like that idea of, of the right moment coming when that type of muse or the inspiration.
It's right. And up until then, it didn't. And so it became what I was doing. And so it brings me to what we started out talking about, which is this new idea. Because of my vision issues, I find that writing and looking at the written word on the page is becoming harder for me. And so so much of what we do is visual, okay? And I started thinking back to the days when I had lost my vision and I was hanging out with my blind brothers and sisters and living life from a totally different perspective. And I said that one of the things that I remember was a little book that said, during the period of time that I was doing rehab and stuff around my vision issues, was this little book called "What Color is the Sun?"
Okay.
And I realized, if you've never seen the sun, what color is it? How do you convey that? And it always stuck with me. And so as my vision issues and my vision started to decline, and I'm starting to think about writing and communicating with poetry and lyricism and other things, when you can't see the written word, then you don't stop writing, but you have to find another way to express yourself. So I've been working on this idea of having creating these, like I said, poetry or sensory moments that allow people to find their own words, their own poetry words that are connected to this moment or moments that you create that allow them to sort of free form. So I'm not giving them words, I'm giving them experiences that allow them to find their own words and to say. So the first one, and this is just an idea, but the first one is called like Blue and Shades of Blue. And it's because, again, taking on the idea of what color is the sun, I said, how would I define blue if I couldn't see blue? And if I never saw blue and I could only express it as through these experiences, what would I write if I could write, And I would like to have, after people go through this sensory experience that is connected to, and it would be, one, no one would be able to see, because I want them to be able to not rely on their vision at all.
Okay.
It's all through the other senses that you connect with things that hopefully will give you inspiration to connect with this idea of blue that's not necessarily rooted in what you think of.
Visual,
right?
Yeah, wow.
But it deepens your maybe connection to it, because you're not allowed to use your eyes, but you have to. We subject you to some experiences that allow you to then say, ah. And at the end, as you leave, we give you the ability. You can take off for those people who can have Braille in, or regular typewriters where people could simply say, we ask, blue is, and you complete that.
That would be pretty cool.
Blue is, and then they can tell us, having gone through this, what is blue? What is blue? And use that as a place for people to, display their answers as a form, like a living type of form.
That's fascinating.
I know it sounds bizarre.
That sounds fascinating. I think that sounds really cool.
So I've been working on that.
Yeah, I know.
What was that? I think that when I couldn't see people, because I couldn't see people, I only saw shapes. So, and I went through white cane training. I still have my white canes with me.
Oh wow!
So because I always felt that if I lost my vision, I wanted to have the ability. I didn't want to ever go back to being totally without the ability to get around and function.
Right.
So I've never given up my white canes, and I'm legally able to use them now if I wanted to. I just don't, because I feel so naked and vulnerable when I put my cane out. I still, and I should get over it. I use a sighted guide, which is what they were using your arm, and the National Federation of Blind People say coward, coward, coward. They would be right, but a lot of people use sighted guides, or these animal, sighted guides, or they have other ways to do it. But the thing is that when you can't see people, then you don't rely on things. You have to rely on other clues and cues, and so it's much easier, I think, to see people when you can't see them.
Interesting. Yeah, like the one piano player, he was explaining stuff to me. He says, "I know exactly where you are. If I put my hand out, I know exactly where your stomach is." I thought was kind of a weird example, but and because he's so aware of what's going on around him, and the different things that he hears and the different feelings and stuff. It's like, wow. And,
you do. It's possible. It's possible to do those things, and there's so much technology now that's available. Really helps. Tremendous technology advancements. So people who are low vision or blind have so many other ways to get around. But the thing is that for me, this is just my way of saying, so how do I transition, create these things? So the first one I want to do is Shades of Blue, but there'll be other ones that I want to do that are all designed around the idea of creating a sort of living poetry that is not.
So it sounds like the next sort of phase of your creativity is going into this thing you're calling living poetry. I love that name, living poetry.
Yes.
Whereas is in enabling other people to actually come up with their own
and their own words, and find their and by forcing them in a way to go deeper and to experiencing life and moments in a deeper way, as a way to unlock possibilities.
So being able to help other people, I'm just curious about your personal journey, what you see your personal, it's helping other people with this living poetry, but how do you feel like this is
helping,
being an expression of your next phase?
Because it requires me to find the creative inspiration to give life to the moments that I'm inviting people to share with me. So I'm like curating.
Okay, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Curating, I like that word.
The whole experience.
So then back to lawyering. So
I
taking this creative obviously this creativity has been a big part of your life, and has been part of what's made you into the lawyer that you are, and into being able to like having your thesis published. I mean, that's pretty awesome.
That was a really crazy moment. Like,
and then, but you're also really into social justice.
Well, because I think that at the end of the day, to stand in the places I've stood, and to have the experiences I have all been about dealing with folks on the margins, being a person on the margins, whether it's because of disability, because of gender, because of race, because of national status, because some places outside of this country, being from the West is not even a good thing, So so you start to see the global type of implications of divisions and things that make it hard for people to just to be the best that we can be. There's so many things so many ways that we are diminished and can be diminished. And I think that for me, one of my purposes, one of the reasons I'm here, is to advocate for those who are vulnerable, who are disenfranchised, those who may not be able to fight or have the skills to fight in the way that I have. Those that I am, without a doubt, I think I'm an advocate, and I think I can be a really fierce advocate when it need be.
Cool.
Yeah, and I can own that now because it's the journey I've been on, and so it comes at a price. It comes at a price. All this comes at a price, but it's a price that I've paid and I've been willing to pay for a little bit longer. I don't think it's something.
So what do you mean by what kind of price are you paying?
I think that you cannot. I don't think you can rattle cages with monsters in them or not.
Okay, I hear what you're talking about. I get the price now. Well, I don't necessarily get the price, but I get the concept of what you mean.
Right, and so you look into the void, and the void looks into you. You cannot get close to things that are twisted and damaged and wicked and awful.
Ooh, and that price too.
And not, which is why, as one of my friends said, that this is not okay. Sometimes you got to get off the battlefield because you can become the very thing that you fight against if you stay too long. So I think it's important that's why I said I try to find ways to heal and purge and do all the things I can to keep my soul intact, even as I fight to do the things that I believe are right. But at some point, it's you walk away and you find find something else to do. So I'm here for now, but I'm absolutely pushing forward to what's over the horizon for me, and I don't know what that looks like. I always tell people, I said you'll see me I will be riding a bicycle with a pipe in my mouth. And on some island somewhere, and I'll be an eccentric old lady. No one will know my name, and that'll be okay.
I love it.
Yeah. But I have no. Anything's possible. I just hope that whatever it is, it's interesting and it allows me to laugh. That I'll be laughing, and loving, and enjoying the beauty of the world, because it's amazing while I still can.
Well, this has been wonderful talking with you, Lola. So let me ask you, where can people find your book?
Okay, it is first you can buy it from Jasmine Publishing.
Okay.
You can also buy it from Amazon if you want to pay their money, and also Barnes. I think Barnes and Noble also carries it. All right. And I'm going to be at the book fair.
Okay.
And I have my book day, so. You can come and actually buy the book for me at the Tucson Book Festival, right? Mm-hmm. And I am going to be posting that. I think it's. Let me get this. This is terrible. I should have been prepared for this. I can see Oba saying, "Well, why didn't you have it all lined up, Lola?" Because I'm Lola. I sometimes.
Well, and also they can find you online. You have a blog, and you have a website.
That's right. Her Eyes Open.
HerEyesOpen.com
is where you'll find a lot of my work posted. Mm-hmm. And And let's see, that I think is it. So for upcoming events, it's going to be the Tucson
Okay.
Book Festival.
We'll have to look for the date on that.
Yeah, and what I can do is, if I don't give it to you, I can text it to you. Can I
Yes.
text? And then
Absolutely.
and then you
And
can.
then we can add it to the show notes.
Okay, that'll work, because that makes lots of sense.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Oh my gosh,
Erica!
thank you so
I
much.
talked so much. I can't believe I covered all these years.
I love it. Thank you, Lola, for joining me on my show, Venus Rising Radio, with your host, Venus Fox, on KMKR 99.9 FM, coming to you live from Tucson, Arizona. And thank you for listening. Can't wait to the next show. See you next week. Good night.